Good morning all, and thank you for joining us for the webinar on It is Assessments That Cause Improvement in partnership with Meritrack. I am Shweta from People Matters, and before speaking about today's agenda, let me give you a brief about the topic. The last decade and a half had witnessed the HR function undergo a tumultuous journey with massive shifts in priorities and approaches. The new generation that has emerged is resulting in new dynamics. A large number of HR policies that we see today are for the millennials by the millennials. Technology has and will continue to transform various aspects of HR management and recruitment, and assessments are not insulated from this. Numerous experiments have been undertaken in the space of recruitment and assessments with technology at the core of most of it. While these changes have been happening, the basics of HR and hiring have not changed. HR continues to be about the key resources of the organization, the human resources. Similarly, experts understand that it is the quality of assessments and not its delivery that have always differentiated best fit candidates from the rest. The webinar will highlight some of the emerging trends in assessments and how the quality of assessments play a critical role in differentiating the quality of candidates. We will discuss the evolution of assessment industry in the last decade, the latest developments, the core tenets of assessment, and why are they critical to the success of hiring. Let me now introduce you to the speaker for this webinar. I am delighted to welcome Somdev Chaudhary, Assessment Product Specialist, Meritrack. An assessment specialist, Somdev manages the assessment products at Meritrack. Somdev has over 24 years of experience in the industry in various roles across customer engagement life cycle. During his tenure at Meritrack, Somdev has supported some of the largest IT, ITES, BFSI, retail, engineering, automobile, steel, oil and gas corporations in their hiring and organizational development initiatives. Somdev possesses sound understanding of the science of assessments, its impact and application in various corporate scenarios. Our partner for today's webinar is Meritrack. Meritrack is India's largest testing and assessment service company in the private sector. It provides innovative assessment services to leading corporates, educational institutions, and government organizations. Meritrack, a group company of Mage, has over the last 15 years been developing and administering tests for over 400 customers in more than 350 cities through 2,000 certified test centers. As a pioneer in the testing space, Meritrack has been leveraging its ISO certified test processes in transforming the way assessments are managed and delivered in India. Meritrack services offer great quality, reliability, and security for consistently delivering high-stake assessments. We have saved time for you to ask your questions at the end of the webinar. For those attending the live webinar can submit their questions anytime during the presentation through the Q&A section. We will try to respond to as many questions as time allows. So we are super excited to hear what our speaker has in store for us today. Therefore, without any further delay, let the experts take over. Somdev, over to you.
Thank you so much, Shweta. Thanks a lot for that introduction. And welcome everyone to the session today. Thanks for participating in significant numbers. I will, so the outline for this webinar has been set. Having said that, I'd like to delve a little on what exactly I'm going to do over the next 40-45 minutes. I'm going to take you through a few things, a few cases that we know of already, few cases out of perhaps thousands of cases in terms of concerns that are there in the hiring and workforce development spheres within organizations. I shall then take you through the importance of assessments, how to share assessment data, and lastly, get into what is it that's happening, that we see happening over the last few years, and what is it that's going to come up in the next few years insofar as assessments are concerned. So that's largely going to be the structure in which the presentation will be made. And just to let you know, this is not the whole idea of conducting this webinar is for one, people who are initiated already into this, a reminder of sorts on how to use assessments, because we continuously hear a lot of concerns about people fitment, about the fact that businesses are not linear anymore, that they need to be competitive, that quality issues plague workforce development initiatives. To give you a little framework and context on how you could use assessments and implement them in the run-up to achieving success out of using the data that comes out of assessments. So this I would think is more of a masterclass in a short format of 45 minutes, but that's what it is. So 2016, where we stand today, is about little over 20 years since the assessments per se came in and began hogging limelight in terms of becoming important. The assessments being used more as, so initially they were used as rejection filters. Now they've moved largely into being selection filters. And what you see here is the pure evolution of assessments over the last 20 years. So initially we had paper-based tests, and which are mostly conducted in-house. We had two international testing companies doing some form of computer-based testing. This is largely Pearson and Prometric, who were conducting international certifications in India. Then we had two Indian testing companies emerge, one Meritrack, two Adequity. Outsourcing of tests began in a significant manner. We moved to some sort of, if I may say, intelligence and process building through the use of OMR-based tests, which helped in processing responses quickly. Then one moved to computer-based tests, testing in corporates and across various segments of IT, services, and product companies, BPO organizations, BFSI, companies in the BFSI segment, retail, manufacturing, engineering, automobile, pharma, etc. A large number of organizations today have adopted assessments and use it for hiring and workforce development, and most of them again being computer based. So one, testing being outsourced as has been a key trend. Two, the use of computer based testing that has emerged over time. That led to in the 2010 year, as a point of reference, about 6 more testing players emerged. So these would be companies like Aspiring Minds, etc. We have simulation and game-based assessments that came in, largely due to initiatives in the space by a company called Nullscape. We had more testing players emerge. We had video-based testing and remote proctoring that has come up. Certifications playing a key role in this whole life cycle. And most importantly, what we see today, one, coming in, and two, going to rule the roost for some time, would be non-language assessments, because we live in a country where English is not our native language. There are vernacular languages, there is teaching, learning, etc. that happens, but in the course of administering assessments in the English language, there seem to be a few gaps in assessing people properly. So language-free tests which ensure that you capture competencies and skill sets appropriately without language being a bar or or working as a spanner in the works, is something that's going to come up in a very large way over the next couple of years. Now, like I mentioned, I would take you through some cases in industry across multiple segments. Here is the first one. So you have a case of inflated recruitment costs. So the example that you see here is that of a position being filled after assessing 24 candidates. So 24 candidates have gone through an assessment. One has been selected. Now, the case here is a sheer skew in terms of the large number of people that needed to be assessed in order for only one candidate to emerge as a probable fit, and the 23 remaining being rejected at a basic skill level. Now, why do such things happen? They primarily happen because job descriptions are not studied properly. The knowledge, skills, abilities, and personality traits are not understood, and the mandatory ones among them not assessed. So the assessment design itself, and then the validity of the test that is created. So the gaps here are the job description to the validity of the test. Now, the solution for such a situation is essentially having assessments which display very strong psychometric properties of validity and reliability. So if you have an assessment of that kind, you're ensuring that skew of the nature that was just explained a little while ago does not occur. Use of right assessments, and most importantly, benchmarking is what is necessary, because not all organizations require the same level of competencies and skill sets across the spectrum. So benchmarking is of essential need here. The next is about attrition. So here is a case where it's said that overheads increased by 42% due to the cost of rehiring and training. Now, the specific case in point being that 26% of candidates hired joined competition in the first 6 months, and there was a difficulty in rehiring good candidates. Now, this is a typical function of a case where companies have engaged in multiple conflicting areas. So companies are into sourcing, training, placement, etc., databasing, so to say. So there is a database, or there are multiple databases as such, built by organizations, shared with possible employers, where the data is a common pool. So you necessarily are creating a conflict of sorts by sharing the same database. You're basically leaving it to the organizations to fight for the best candidates, and which is what is leading to this case of attrition of good candidates. The solution to this, now, before I move on to the solution, non-disclosure clauses is what would significantly bind and ensure that such things don't happen. So you're basically getting into a situation where you're saying that a particular set of candidates is available to a particular organization, and the organization is free to select. The ones who are not selected are obviously free for others in the pool to choose from. So a mechanism needs to be developed and deployed, rather than get into a situation where you're hiring companies to fight over the same database. Solution one, a candidate database and information to be maintained by the company itself, and assessment to be independent of sourcing, training, or placement, because sourcing, training, and placement is essentially in conflict with the assessment process, right? So that's the solution here in this second case. The third case is of on-the-job performance. And an internal survey for employees within an organization revealed that 35% were actively disengaged and only 21% was strongly engaged. So what do you think is the cause for such a situation? It is essentially that candidates in assessment scores displayed a certain set of traits with a certain set of scores, but what did not happen, so I've gone into the why, but that's the important part here, is that fitment was not determined basis the complete set of components within a job description, which is your knowledge, skills, ability, and personality. So there would be interest areas based on personality traits and behavioral traits that one is typically prone to display and which determines fitment to job. So those are things that did not happen and which caused one a disconnect in the candidate and the job, and the expectations from the job, and which resulted in managers' feedback and employee feedback revealing that there's lack of motivation. It's nothing but a fitment gap that is the root cause of such a thing. Now, the solution for this again is a complete test of all the components of knowledge, skills, abilities, and personality. So I do understand that dynamics, recruitment dynamics per se. So while the learning and development dynamics is, I would think, fairly evolved today, and there is significant time that's spent, the recruitment dynamics still talks of tests. So I've heard people in the recruitment space saying that give us a test of 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Now in 20, 30 minutes, what? So you're pressurizing an assessment provider, and that's not only me and Meritrack. You're pressurizing assessment providers to, one, get into situations which are difficult, and in the process make them not to deliver the goods. So one, understanding of what is there available in the marketplace today. I wish there is a time that comes where we have some brilliant technology which ensures that an assessment is conducted in 5 minutes and knowledge, skills, abilities, and personality traits are correctly measured and reported. But that's not the case today, right? So one, for complete understanding of the need to conduct detailed assessments, which in turn helps subsequent stages in the hiring and onboarding and subsequent learning and development cycle, and decisions to be taken specifically on the performance in trainable and non-trainable traits. So you clearly, and I'm sure in this audience here today, we have a lot of initiated people who understand the trainable and non-trainable traits. So take decisions based on this, and for which measures or metrics have been obtained from the assessments, and deploy resources accordingly. That's the key here. The next one is about degrading performance. So here is a case where an organization was not able to place 21% of its existing employees in projects due to lack of sufficient skills. What was this? This is basically a large pool of employees, and if I may use the word, on the bench, not employable on new projects, basically not billable. That's what this talent pool was, due to no necessarily if I may say, fault of their own. Now, what's happening here is employees spend sufficient time, but in cases where bench comes in, the skills stagnate. The skills and the abilities are not tuned to the level where industry expects today. Now, the solution for this is very clearly rigorous assessments, learning and development interventions being designed based on the scores from assessments, and ensuring that people stay relevant to the demanding times that we are in today, or that we shall be in tomorrow. That's the last story. So, like I said, very few of the thousands of other cases that are plaguing the industry, and for which assessments, appropriate assessments, proper measuring, proper deployment to roles seem to be the key. Now, if I may call these 20 years as the period in which the assessment movement significantly began and took shape, then what we see as drivers are demands from stakeholders for better and more transparent information about talent pool, about employees, and about organizational performance. And to do which, there is a need to collect and use learning outcomes data, and what we see today is the availability of more and better instruments and approaches to do so. What that has led to is a perceived legitimacy in the assessment movement, new policies in learning and development, external stimuli. So where one generic stimuli, for example, is the case of saying of customers demanding more for less. So essentially saying for a particular project, I don't want to pay for 100 resources. I want more to be done with 75 resources. Those are business stimuli and certainly external stimuli that has ensured that changes have happened in the assessment movement and things have taken significant shape. Most importantly, what we see today is huge immersive technology that has come in to rule the assessment movement. That's what we have seen until now. How all of this has transformed the whole space of human resources and measurement is two significant paradigms that we see today. One, we have assessments for improvement. Two, we have assessments for accountability. Just to give you an example, let's say a BVQI run ISO standard certification. It's largely an external assessment that is done by way of compliance to remain competitive and significant in the market space for domains in which organizations work, and is largely summative in nature. That would be an assessment for accountability. You have assessments for improvement, and which is what we see day in, day out within organizations. These are formative because assessment scores are largely meant to lead to design of specific training interventions and in turn really cause improvement. The stance there typically been internal, and the reason why it's done is, one large reason why this is done is to ensure engagement. So you have compliance on the one hand and engagement on the other, shifting between two paradigms of accountability and improvement. The application choices, as you see, are one in terms of assessment instruments. It could be multiple instruments leading to experimentation and innovation, etc. One for account, and that's the case in improvement. For accountability, you're largely looking at standardized frameworks and metrics. The nature of evidence in assessments for improvement are quantitative and qualitative. For accountability, it's largely quantitative. The reference points for improvement are over time, they're comparative, and they are established goals. But in the case of accountability, it's largely fixed standards that people are looking at, because you're essentially looking at the predominant ethos of compliance. The communication of results of improvement are through multiple internal channels and media that we have at work today. So when I say media, I'm not talking about press, I'm talking about media within an organization. And the assessment for accountability is largely the communication of results to external stakeholders and to the market at large is through public communication. So you would have seen our leading newspapers carry a lot of information and advertorials which are essentially declaring that a company has done XYZ things in the compliance context. This is essentially to reach out to markets. The use of results in assessments for improvement is through multiple feedback loops, and like I mentioned already, the ones for accountability are reporting. So these two things are things that need to be considered in the run-up to understanding why assessments cause improvement and how assessments are used also for accountability. Now, in the accountability and improvement paradigm, what we've also seen that it has influenced the organizational choices about what and how to assess, how to organize the assessment tasks and strategies, and how to communicate the assessment results. And this may be slightly repetitive from the previous slide, but the point that I'm trying to make here is that assessment for improvement and assessment for accountability, one which is internal in nature, the other which is largely compliance and external centric. So one which is internal and engagement oriented, and the other which is external and compliance oriented, lead to different choices that organizations have to make. And in the context of all this, there are guiding principles for organizations in dealing with these two paradigms successfully. So the first and key among them, and I'm kind of reading this out because this is extremely critical and important, you respond visibly to domains of legitimate external concern, and that is how you build assessments either for improvement or for compliance. You show action on the results of assessment. You simply cannot assess and leave and not use the assessment data, right? And third is emphasize assessment at major transition points in an employee life cycle. And this is what would lead to improvement. And I'm thinking to accountability as well. So there could be a thin line that separates improvement and accountability, albeit for internal and external reasons. And most importantly, embed assessments in the regular learning, development, and performance management cycle. In a few slides from now, I shall show you how assessment causes improvement. While I'm sure all of you realize that, and inherently, I think we are tuned to correct ourselves. So course correction happens only when assessment happens, and it's but a no-brainer to understand that it would cause improvement. So I shall come to that in a few slides from now. But again, delving little more into the assessment, accountability, and improvement aspects. Why this has become important is because the stakes associated with organizational performance are so very high today that it is imperative to collect and use assessment results to improve. And it is also imperative to communicate what is being done more effectively and to become more effective. And I think all of us know this, right? Data helps more than English language, as in data helps more than being verbose with words and sentences. So to be more effective, you need assessment data to be able to communicate more effectively to external audiences what is it that's happened, the achievements, and to achieve the individual and organizational success parameters that exist today. That's one. The other context is to say that all of this has led to very complicated initiatives in the assessment space. So I certainly know of technology companies, and coming from that background, pardon my taking references to IT services and product companies all the time, but I've seen organizations which have a myriad of assessments. They have knowledge-based assessments, they have skill-based assessments, they have behavioral assessments. Within skill-based assessments, they have multiple choice question formats of items, they have case studies, they have standalone skill set assessments, they have integrated assessments. So the development in that space has been huge, and I'm sure it happens across other domains as well. So that is something that has happened over time. And standardized certifications. So for all that I mentioned, there is also a need to have certifications, some which exist already, some which are evolving. This to help standardized measurement and to gain scalability in the larger context of achieving learning and development excellence for the workforce. And what certainly exists is the compelling need to show evidence of knowledge and skills needed to perform in the job. So you have stakeholders asking. So again, going back to a technology scenario, there are buyers today which specifically ask to reveal workforce details in the context of every head that is deployed to a project and the kind of knowledge and skills they possess, not merely by a statement from the organization, but by displaying what is it that shows that a person is knowledgeable and has appropriate skills. So it could be certifications, it could be internal examinations, it could be external assessments, it could be on the project work, it could be various metrics, but that is the kind of information that buyers ask for today. One last piece on the accountability and improvement piece vis-a-vis assessments. Now for For all of this to work, for assessment-based improvement to take proper effect, the learning objectives, and while it may seem I'm reading out, but this is important, must be inescapable. So you're talking about learning objectives being visible in every possible place that an employee lays his eyes upon. So that's the nature, that's the extent to which learning objectives must be built in. And most importantly, faculty or trainers should have criteria which is visible to them. Like I said, to the employees, learning objectives becoming visible. To trainers and faculty members, the criteria for grading and marking or scoring should be visible all the time. So appropriate work happens when assessment takes place and objectives are met properly. All of these learning outcomes need to be continuously mapped. So you can't be designing interventions today and expecting the same set of things to work tomorrow when the market changes have already perhaps happened. And all of this, so the mapping of learning outcomes to various competencies and the whole life cycle, that essentially leads to a systematic competency-based approach, and competency requirements change over time. So this whole aspect of continuously mapping competencies and reinforcing them through learning and development process is another critical aspect of assessments. The last part is about evidence. For everything that we do, we need to necessarily provide evidence, and evidence which is a key and critical outcome of assessments, because each stakeholder in the approach, in the assessment approach, be it external or internal, has specific interest which is driven by the evidence and which influences organizational and program performance. I've spent a significant amount of time on this, and I think I just have about 15 odd minutes, so I might be rushing here a bit, but this section is essentially talking about assessment data and its use. So the underlying concept here is of having an outcomes-based approach and having a strong theory of alignment all the way down to individual learning activities, which helps facilitate the use of assessment data. That's the whole concept and key. And this is something that's the value of this is driven intrinsically by assessments, and this is something that assessments stand for. So using results of assessment is the key. I mean, why else would one use assessment? You need, so in every literature that is there about assessments, it has to do with the outcome, which is used to do or trigger the next chain of activities. So in this whole scheme, there are also concerns about closing the loop because of the lack of appropriate use. And most importantly, the causal statements, the ability to make claims based on data. So unless you use data appropriately, you cannot stake a claim about anything at all, anything that impacts learning and the learners themselves. Most importantly, this also leads to a change in organizational structures and support systems, which of course taken with learning as a common denominator, which would lead to enhanced learning. So that's how significant it is to use assessment data. One next slide about the data is about the areas of probable change using the data. So you could change, you see change in coverage and content of learning. You could change opportunities and support mechanisms and infrastructure to aid learning and enhance learning and development. And most importantly, change could be intentional, it could be coherent, and it could align itself to a particular objective. So those are the impacts, are the significant impact areas, change areas of using assessment data. Now, what all of this essentially leads to is an understanding that these areas of change, within these areas of change lies a root cause about why learners were not learning or not meeting outcome and mechanism by which the organization could help them succeed. Now, in this whole context, a slight shift is about the evidence of learning. Now, the evidence of learning is used in support of claims or arguments about improvement and accountability told through stories to persuade a specific audience. Now, remember this whole thing, the whole information that is coming to you is in the context of using assessment data, in the context of understanding that assessments can be used for improvement and accountability. So that's basically leading to understanding how the evidence of learning can be used. So how do you do it? So essentially, you're talking about a lot of discussions, reflections. You're looking at involvement of multiple stakeholders, including learners and trainers. You're looking continuously at measuring and understanding how it is living up to the desired outcomes. You're embedding the assessments within organizations, and you're documenting and communicating clearly when such change occurs from assessments. You clean and transform data. This again, pardon my use of the phrase, but this is a no-brainer. So you filter data, you action analytics based on this data, you audit data, you analyze. You do all of this to ensure that you're in the right path to achieving the objectives and aligning yourself to organizational needs. Few other pointers in that same context is about discussion and reflection. So a little elaborate, if I may say, explanation of what I just spoke of. So essentially in discussion and reflection, you're making meaning of assessment results. You're involving multiple stakeholders, and you're ensuring that data points are used appropriately. How do you use time to reflect? You build into the assessment process time, space, and mechanism from people within and potentially outside the organizations to engage with results. That's how you reflect. You tell the organizational story in the context of what you wish to achieve through assessments. I mean, is it improvement or is it accountability? And embed, I've spoken about this before, embed through a clear ask of various questions. So how do you know things happen? Why do you think a particular thing happened? And why is a particular assessment? So what is this thing about using multiple choice questions, case studies to write integrated assessment using technology platform? Why is it only that particular approach? So that's how you embed things with a clear understanding of the what, why, and how. But most importantly, not to get caught in the change trap. This is a caution of sorts to allow time for change to happen. You cannot. So, for example, in the startup culture, I believe time is of essence. And in the process, they might hurry into things and not even allow time for things to sink in and for the changes to take effect. So a very clear caution is not to get caught in that trap and to allow time for effects to take place. Now, this is what I was talking about some time ago. This is a finding at a company basis an international certification. So what you see in the graph is on the you have the months indicated, and alongside which you have mean scores indicated. What this graph shows is the progression over mean score in successive waves of testing. So testing was carried out in October, November, December, Jan, February, March, etc. There was a significant movement in terms of improvement in performance based on this examination. Now what happened is, and I need to detail this a little bit. So after testing, the first wave of testing was carried out in October. The learning and development team got into details, understood each area of strength and weakness of their employees, and the second wave of testing was conducted. What this led to very clearly was designing of specific training interventions, which led very clearly to enhanced performance at a level where people were given feedback at an individual, if I may say, subtopic level to say that you are deficient in this, you need to work around this, you need to refer to materials, you need to practice more and come to a level of high performance. So this very clearly shows that it is assessments that cause improvement. Yeah. Now, that was the second part of the presentation. I have another 8 to 10 minutes in which I shall take you through the changing dynamics of assessments. Uh, One, we've seen technology. So we've seen technology used for various purposes. We've seen various kinds of testing. We've seen the classical testing theory. We've seen adaptive testing. We've seen video interview platforms. We've seen remote proctoring. We have seen things like digital marking. We have also seen integrated recruitment delivery platforms which look at everything from capturing candidate information to assessment scores to interview feedback and observations and consolidating them at a single point before integrating it to HRMSs of organizations. That's what technology has done to assessments. So from paper-based, today we are talking about integration of assessment and interview observations to HRMS of organizations. And what we certainly see today is a lot of activity in the mobile space. So there is a significant effort in trying to leverage mobility to ensure significant changes in the in at least one, the hiring life cycle, and two, in bite-sized or bit-sized learning. We are looking at widespread use of personality assessment. So aptitude, technology, skills, various domains, everything from an accounting, banking, etc. being assessed, that has left a lot of room, and that on the one hand, compared to fitment issues on the other, have clearly led to the understanding that attitude is something that needs to be measured, and attitude is measured through personality or behavioral assessments. So we are increasingly seeing the use of personality or behavioral assessments in ensuring appropriate fitment, not only that, in ensuring engagement and to address attrition issues. So we are seeing the use of personality assessments significantly. What we also have seen, this has been happening over some time. We've seen simulations, gaming, as in when I say gaming, game theory at work, and use of stealth assessments coming up and being in place. So we see a lot of simulation-led assessments which imitate the workplace. So, for example, there is an assessment which is named call center simulation. Now, what this assessment does is really put into work an assessment that simulates a customer speaking, simulates the fact that you could dig into your existing database or information base and churn out responses based on which a customer responds in a particular manner and you take it forward. So that's the kind of simulations that's happening. There is the non-language based assessments that is that would strongly come up given the landscape of skills that we have today. So fortunately, we are speaking the English language. We get measured, we progress or not progress, whatever happens. But mind you, there's a whole large workforce there, both in the organized and the unorganized space, which is actually going to fuel India's growth. And that is a segment which is not going to be assessed through standard assessments. That is a segment which needs to be assessed, but for which today it's a mechanism which is not scalable. So you have assessor-led environments where an expert actually puts someone to work, measures the ability or the skills of a person, bases the work done, and scores or grades an individual. That is something which is not scalable at all, because in one day, for example, you can measure only about 20, 30 people, not more. Now, if you are to look at a scalable option, then you're certainly looking at language-free, perhaps tab-based assessments which could influence happenings in this space. So you're looking at, and when I say tab-based, you must be wondering, oh, okay, so one hand you're talking about people not understanding English, and on the other hand you're talking about tablet-based. Now, mind you, if if any of us in this audience or on the panel know about the penetration of mobiles and smartphones in the country, it's not a surprise that tabs can be used for assessments for that segment, right? So we're looking at language-free, technology-aided solutions in the run-up to this changing dynamic of assessments. Finally, we are looking at a lot of, coming back to both the organized and the unorganized space, we're looking at life cycle assessments. We're looking at assessments from the time a person enters the workforce to the time he or she exits the workforce, to aid in engagement, to ensure retention, and to most importantly ensure that the person is of use to the organization. Life cycle assessments are the order of the day. And basis everything that's happening around big data and the word about analytics, we are certainly looking at huge use of learning analytics to aid and abet a situation where efficiency, competitiveness, and excellence is the order of the day. So this is what we see as the changing dynamic of assessments. And finally, for everyone in this audience and perhaps outside who would perhaps get to see or know about this, a few basics, and this is like hygiene. This is like to maintain sanity of systems, processes, is look at the core tenets of any assessment from anyone in this world. It could be from ETS, it could be from Cambridge, it could be from Meritrack, it could be from aspiring minds, it could be from anyone in this space. Please look at the reliability and validity of the test. Please ensure that question banks in use are validated. Please ensure that assessments are proctored to prevent malpractice, and ensure the security built into every stage of the assessment process, right from candidate information to movement of question packs and result packs, etc. The entire works in the whole assessment process. And largely, to look at principles that guide these organizations. So, third-party neutral agencies which have no conflict of interest is a key principle in choosing an assessment provider. No compromise. So when you ensure that, you're also ensuring that, in a way, you're ensuring that there's no compromise of candidate information, because if you're operating in a no conflict zone, you're necessarily ensuring through contracting, non-disclosure and other means that candidate information is not compromised upon. And most importantly, by dint of those two, you're ensuring secure management of assessment data. So that would be the last slide in this presentation. I'm thinking that was a lot of information. I'm happy to engage with you either at the end of this session. I'm not sure we'd have enough time, but feel free to get in touch with me otherwise. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your patience. And this would be the end of the message that I wanted to drive across, which is about assessments causing improvement. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks a lot, Somdev. It was a very amazing presentation, and yes, a lot of information for our viewers, so perhaps I think they were very happy. So let's move on with the question and answer session. So the first question is coming from Nidhi, and she says, can you give 2 to 3 examples, like how does culture of organization is connected to the tools chosen for assessment? And how much of it is necessary, and whether we need multiple tools or not?
Nidhi, interesting question. So culture to assessment, and let me be honest, being in the assessment industry, I don't think I have a direct response to that. However, the way I see it, it's about, and irrespective of the nature of the organization, I think we are living in times which are highly competitive, and given that nature of competition, you're essentially looking at you're certainly looking at knowledge, skills, abilities, and personality traits which define roles. And if that is what it is, and if you have to make sense out of, so if high performance is the culture, then you're necessarily looking at assessments. And if you're looking at assessments, I don't think there is one service provider, one assessment service provider, or one test provider who would have answer to all your questions. So while people are trying to reach that space, I'm not sure if looking at the entire spectrum from entry level talent to leadership, there is one single organization which has all the offerings, and which essentially means that you're looking at multiple assessment providers. That's one. And two, like I said, I'm assuming culture to be that of performance, and if it is performance, then it's certainly looking at those key attributes of knowledge, skills, abilities, and personality. And like I said, you're looking at various assessment providers, and this in the context of talking about entry-level talent to talent at the leadership levels.
Great. Thank you so much, Somdev, for answering that. So moving on to the next one, which is coming from Nutan. So Nutan wants to know any drivers that would guide organizations to select between assessment for improvement or assessment for accountability.
Absolutely. So the assessment for improvement essentially, and like it was mentioned in the slide, it's essentially targeted around one, engagement. So engagement with employees in the run-up to achieving excellence, which is required at the workplace. That's one. Two, assessment for accountability, like it was again mentioned earlier, it's essentially external facing, more compliance oriented. So if an organization is looking at compliance and making an impact in the market space to be an organization among its peers or otherwise to be counted on by sheer dint of compliance, then that would be the driver. But if for the organization engagement is key, and it knows for certain that engagement in the run-up to excellence through the use of assessments is going to drive the organization, then people engagement is what would drive the organization to take up such assessments.
Great, very well. So moving on, we have a question from Ankit Mehra. He says, do you feel continuous assessments of employees, such as life cycle assessment and analytics, make them feel under pressure all the time?
It's a good question, Ankit. I think we are living in times where there is a mix of both. So when I say there is a mix of both, I know of a bunch of people, and preferably in the I would think in a 5 to 10 year workspace, and certainly below that, who have been used to assessments, who are no more they're not scared of taking up assessments. They understand that it's for their improvement. But largely what it depends on is more than the individual. It largely depends on the communication that comes up from the HR of organizations. So again, that whole context about the storytelling about the need for assessments is key here. So if you're able to communicate appropriately, I don't think fear and pressure exist in individuals. And I would think 80% of the individuals, you'll always have a 20% using Pareto's law, a 20% deviant population. But if 80% works, then it's a significant number, and that could cause a significant impact in outcomes and results.
Great. Thank you, Somdev, for answering that. So next one is coming from Iram. She says, thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. Could you please elaborate more on language-free assessments?
Thank you so much for that appreciation. Language-free assessment. So, if I may, I don't have too much time, but if I may explain. So this would typically be, if you're looking at the form, then this would typically be an assessment which has to do with figures, with pictures, with and mind you, I mentioned use of technology there because that would make things scalable. However, even if technology is not there, things can be done. So you still will measure underlying traits and abilities. You'll measure problem-solving skills, but you'll essentially do them through the use of pictures, and anything that can be diagrammatically represented. One, most importantly, that is not outside the realm of understanding of anyone who does not even have basic education. So that's the language-free nature of assessments that I was talking about. So you don't even have instructions which are in a language. So for example, if there is a tablet device and you are expected to do something, there is a hand which comes up and shows, and it moves towards a particular set of tasks, let's say. And that means you're expected to do something. Just a rough example, but that's what I was trying to mean.
Thank you, Somdev, for answering that. So due to paucity of time, we have space to take just one last question, which is coming from Sonali. So she wants to know, can you please highlight on the sort of budget approvals that would be needed from the management in order to implement some of these latest assessment tools that are there?
Sonali, that's an extremely difficult question for me to answer. So the key drivers there would be, one, a proper needs analysis of the assessment requirements across levels within your organization. Two, so essentially the variables there, one would be your workforce strength. Two, the number of assessments that we required for each, and then I think you could arrive at the total amount that would be required. But largely, to give you sense, in an organization, and it has been seen from empirical data, 2% of the revenue is typically a learning and development budget of an organization, and this covers multiple things, mind you. It covers everything from an induction training to competency-based assessments to leadership workshops to your participation in various certification programs. So that's a lot of components, but if I have to look at a ballpark figure, 2% of revenue is a learning and development budget that is largely being used in industry.
Great, perfect. Thank you so much, Somdev, for answering that last one for us. And with this question and answer session, we are going to wrap up today's webinar. Once again, we thank today's webinar partner, Meritrack. Also, our special thanks to our speaker, Somdev, for this webinar and the amazing information that he has shared with us today. And I would like to thank everyone in the webinar audience for participating in today's presentation. We will be back soon. So this concludes today's webcast. Thank you all and have a great day ahead.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone.